It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
I want to introduce you to the first time on the program. We have Mr. Norman Rogers is on the program with us. Norman, are you there, sir?
I am. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, absolutely. It's always great to have you on. You have a book. You're a retired physicist, author of a book called Dumb Energy, A Critique of Wind and Solar Energy. What made you want to write that book, sir?
Well, I've been studying green energy for a while, and I just wanted to set the record straight. Absolutely useless. They're not cheaper than the existing sources of energy, and there's really no reason to be building them.
Okay, so dumb energy, wind and solar energy have negative economic value. How is that? That's not what we hear. We hear that it's the future and that we need to subsidize it because of evil, oil companies or whatever.
Well, that's why they have negative economic value, because they're heavily subsidized. Either wind or solar is subsidized approximately 70%. So if these things are so wonderful, how come we have to subsidize 70% of the cost?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. What about, and they also kill birds, right?
Yeah, actually both of them can kill birds, but the windmills are the big ones. Those blades are moving 200 miles an hour, and if the bird gets in the way of the blade, they can't get out of the way in time.
How does a solar panel kill a bird?
Well, the solar panel type, called the photovoltaic solar, doesn't really kill birds much. It's called the thermal solar that kills the birds, where they have a large number of mirrors that direct the sun towards the tower, and the intensity of the light at that tower is very high. So if the bird flies into that region, the poor bird catches on fire.
Oh, wow. Well, gosh. Okay, so we're trying to save the planet. That's what the left is trying to do with all of this stuff. But that they're also, they're also killing wildlife, which you'd think they'd be upset about. But and I know some of them are. But that's pretty interesting to me. Extensive lobbying and outright propaganda has convinced the public that it's a good idea to spend billions on this dumb wind and solar energy. The facts and figures in this book, it's easily understood format. So, I mean, your book here, again, Dumb Energy, A Critique of Wind and Solar. I mean, you expose all that. So you think a lot of these politicians have these ideas and vote the way they do because of
and also the environmental groups are another sort of industry, and they have a big stake in this, and so they constantly propagandize the public with the idea that the wind and solar is cheap because they say how much it costs after you've applied the subsidies. Yeah, it's a hoax, basically.
It's a hoax, and yet you have the darling of the left, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, calling for a new Green Deal or a green revolution. What are your thoughts on that, Norman?
Well, I think she should go back to bartending. I don't know what would be accomplished by a new Green Deal other than wasting a lot of money and enriching the people selling windmills and solar. If these people were really concerned about emissions of carbon dioxide changing the climate, they would be promoting nuclear, because nuclear, unlike wind and solar, nuclear is reliable energy that you can count on. It doesn't have to be backed up. And nuclear doesn't emit any carbon dioxide. And by the way, some of the biggest proponents of global warming are in favor of nuclear. But by and large, the left hates nuclear for some reason.
Well, so yeah, tell me about the carbon dioxide, because I see here that are you affiliated or a member of the CO2 Coalition? What's the CO2 Coalition?
Yes, the CO2 Coalition is a group that is promoting the benefits of carbon dioxide. As I think everyone knows, plants breathe in carbon dioxide, and for plants, carbon dioxide is like oxygen for us. They have to have it to grow. And there's not very much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So if you enrich the atmosphere with more carbon dioxide, plants grow better, and also you need less water. And as a result of the 30% increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in the last 30 years or so, we've seen desert degreening and improved productivity in agriculture. You may not know it, but most greenhouses include carbon dioxide generators because the carbon dioxide makes their plants grow faster.
You know, it's basic science. I mean, I remember it Biology 101, and I was like, wow, it's such a great symbiotic relationship. You know, they need the stuff that I breathe out, and I need the stuff that they put out, you know. And yet, Norman, can you talk a little bit about, we're talking with Norman Rogers. He's a retired physicist, author of the book Dumb Energy, A Critique of Wind and Solar Energy. Norman, can you talk a little bit about like facts and how we get to a consensus? Because, I mean, we're in a situation where, you know, some people call it a post-truth world. We have people that would just outright reject what you just said. And because they're, first of all, they've never heard it, they never taught it. But then we have these other academics that would disagree with you. I agree with you, but I'm just, you know, I'm frustrated. I think the entire country, the entire world is frustrated by the idea that we can't come to consensus. You're saying the complete opposite of what the mainstream media would say and of what, you know, half the country would say.
Yes, I'm not alone in saying this, by the way. There are plenty of skeptics of global warming. It's not an easy thing to debunk passionately held beliefs. Most people are not really interested in a logical analysis if they've already come to the conclusion that this or that is true. Part of the problem is that the people who we should be trusting, the scientific establishment, has a financial stake in this. The problem is that if you predict a catastrophe or a disaster, it gets you a lot of attention, it gets you money. So there's a real bias towards overselling ideas, and certainly global warming has been oversold. And this is something that President Eisenhower worried about in his farewell speech 50 years or so ago. He was worried that the scientific establishment would start trying to influence federal policy because federal money is what they lived on. Or at least greatly exaggerating the science in order to get more money, more support from the federal government. All the predictions of global warming are based on computer models of the atmosphere, and the predictions have been consistently wrong. They've been consistently greatly exaggerated.
You know, it's interesting that you talk about the monetary aspect here, and that the socialist left that loves this idea of climate change. Ocasio-Cortez thinks everything's going to end in 12, 13 years. And yet the scientists producing the research fueling all of this nonsense are actually capitalists in a way. And I think that's pretty ironic.
Yeah, yes. And not just the scientists, the environmental organizations. The environmental organizations need a parade of catastrophes to keep things going, to get people interested, to get attention. And if you look at the last 50 years or so, there have been a parade of catastrophes like, oh, DDT is going to poison the soil, or acid rain is going to destroy the forests and the crops. It goes on and on. And global warming, which is now called climate change, is the kind of the latest one. And one sign of hope is that these catastrophes tend to peter out after a while because people just become bored with it, and also they notice that the predictions are not coming true. So I do think that eventually the climate change is going to peter out. It already has petered out in the sense that they used to call it global warming, and because there wasn't any global warming, or not very much, they changed the name to climate change. So, yeah.
Well, why are all of their solutions to deal with these, you know, this non-issue? Why are all their solutions socialism? I mean, that's always their idea is essentially to have more control and less freedom. Those are their solutions, you know?
Yeah, well, certainly the people who are in favor of expanding the government and running everything from Washington like the climate catastrophe story because it gives an excuse for more centralization and more socialism.
Wow. We're talking with Norman Rogers, again, a retired physicist. The book is called Dumb Energy, a critique of wind and solar energy. You also are, have you taught in academia? Is that what I'm reading here?
No, not
Okay.
Not really.
No, I'm reading your credentials here. So you have a BA in physics from the University of California, Berkeley, and MS in physics from the University of Hawaii. Okay, that's what I'm reading here. But you've worked for IBM, Hewlett Packard, and other organizations. The Heartland Institute here, I feel like I'm reading here as an associated organization, which is really, really good. And again, that CO2 coalition, I love that name because people probably think it's it's like a pro global warming thing, but yet you guys are talking about, you guys are big proponents of CO2. I think that's fantastic. And can you talk a little bit about CO2 and how CO2 levels don't drive temperature? Most people think that they do.
Well, from first physical principles, you would expect CO2 to have some influence on the temperature. And the question really is how much. The proponents of catastrophic global warming claim that the effect of CO2 suffers from strong positive feedback. So if CO2 were to cause a degree of warming, that might be multiplied by a factor of 3. The theory being that if you have a little bit of warming, it puts more water vapor in the atmosphere, and that creates yet more warming. And so they even sometimes say it could be runaway warming, but none of that's panned out. They have tests to see if this feedback exists, and they haven't been able to find any good evidence for it. The computer models they use to predict the future, the computer models don't even agree with each other.
Yeah,
they have huge disagreements.
Back to the point of your book, the critique of wind and solar energy. I mean, what do we do if it's cloudy, and what do we do if the wind doesn't blow?
Yeah, what we do is we fire up a backup plant, which is usually a natural gas plant, to fill in the gap. And that's why wind and solar are not economic, because if you build wind and solar installations, you have to have a whole parallel installation of probably a natural gas plant to back up the wind or solar. Solar in particular doesn't work at all at night. So that's the fallacy of trying to have 100% solar. You can't do it because you have to have something else at night.
Yeah, and then, I remember real quickly Solyndra under the Obama administration. You had a campaign bundler for Obama that ended up getting, $500 million for Solyndra. Then it went bankrupt. And then, they had the video of the warehouse workers throwing away all of these solar panels, breaking them, throwing them in a dumpster because it was more economic to throw them away than to store them and pay the storage fee. You remember that?
Yeah, I hadn't seen that video, but I'm not surprised. If you go down to Palm Springs, a lot of people don't remember back in the 70s when we had the oil price crisis. There was a big move towards wind and solar back then. And in Palm Springs, there's all these wind farm graveyards where you have old broken down windmills that were built back in the 70s to generate electricity and then abandoned after a while.
Wow. Well, Norman Rogers, retired physicist, author of the book Dumb Energy, a critique of wind and solar energy. We appreciate you coming on the program, spending some time with us this morning, sir, and best of luck to you.
Thank you.